Hello and welcome to our Winter Ready Northland presentation, or what we like to call our Winter Spotter presentation. This version was recorded in November 2022, but it should be valid for the following winter as well. So if you're watching this in 2023 sometime, the content is about the same that we like to present each year. My name is Joe Moore. I am our warning coordination meteorologist. I've been at this office for about 8 years, about 5 years as a forecaster and 3 years as our warning coordination meteorologist. I previously worked at our offices in Goodland, Kansas, and also at our headquarters office in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I am originally from the Philadelphia area. This presentation has a handout document that goes along with it. You can find it on our Winter Spotter webpage. That's weather.gov/Duluth/Winter Spotter. At the bottom of the page, there's a link to this PDF and handout with links to a number of the websites that we'll talk about in this presentation. Every time you see link and handout at the top right means that the link to what we're talking about on that slide is available on that handout. We also have kind of a nice one-pager on how to report winter precipitation to us in the winter months. About the National Weather Service in Duluth, we are a dedicated team of about 20 staff, approximately 16 of whom are meteorologists, and we're focused on northeast Minnesota, northwest Wisconsin, and western Lake Superior. We are staffed locally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we do public weather forecasts and warnings that you've probably heard when you hear a winter storm warning or a tornado warning. When it's been issued for this area of the country, it's from our office. We also, in addition to that, do a number of specialized services. We do forecasts for Lake Superior for the marine areas. We do forecasts for fire partners, whether it's a wildfire or a prescribed burn. We do aviation forecasts for local airports and other sectors. This presentation has kind of 4 parts. We're going to start off talking about winter weather safety. Before the storm, you should be prepared, and this is great advice in the summer or the winter months. Be ready for about living 3 days off the grid in case there's a major storm that strands you at home. That means having 3 days of food and water. That also means having a way to receive information like a radio. And that also means being prepared for everybody in your household, including pets, if that's relevant to you. When a storm is coming, it's ensured to make sure your supplies are stocked up. That might mean charging up your cell phone charger in case you lose power, making sure that you have batteries for any devices that you would want to stay charged and be entertained when you have to stay at home. That also means having 3 days of food and water, of course, but that also might mean making sure that you have medications that you might need. So making sure that you get your medication renewed and have enough so that you can survive at home if you happen to be stuck at home for a few days. If you have to travel, it's a great idea to prepare your vehicle for winter. If you must travel, it's a good idea to have these things in your vehicle. Things like having a first aid kit is a great idea. Having some snacks and water is a good idea in case you get stuck. Also having boots and mittens and anything else that you need to stay warm. Having a couple of blankets in your trunk is a great thing to have in the middle of the winter, just in case you get stuck and you have to stay in your car. When you're going out, if you're driving and there's a winter storm, it's a good idea to fill up your gas tank before the storm in case there are a power outage or in case you slide off the road and you're stuck off the road for a few hours while you wait for help. A lot of times during the worst conditions of a storm, it can be really difficult for first responders and tow trucks to get out to pick you up, and it might be a few hours until help arrives. It's a good idea if you have to drive, be prepared. During the storm, the best thing, of course, in a big winter storm is to stay put. The fewer cars that are on the road means our roads get cleared faster and our first responders aren't put into danger. Be careful at home with any alternative heat sources. So if your power goes out and you're using a wood-burning stove that you haven't used recently, it's a good idea to be safe with that. Be really careful because those can be a major contributing factor in fires. It's also a good idea to make sure your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors have power and are working. Press that test button on the device to make sure that it's still working. And remember that smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors that are older than 10 years must be replaced. They don't last longer than that. So if you see the date on there of when it was manufactured and it's been more than 10 years, you have to replace it. It's not good anymore. Obviously, staying put during the storm is great advice, especially when we have to deal with a blizzard. These are pictures from the 2019 Thanksgiving blizzard. On the left is Cloquet. On the right is Interstate 35, from courtesy of the St. Louis County Rescue Squad. You don't want to be out in these conditions. That's the last thing you want, is to have to be stuck on the side of the road for hours when the roads are really just untravelable. If you have to travel, though, we know in a lot of winter situations, you're going to travel anyway. Ice and snow, take it slow. If you have to be out there, it's a great idea to take it very slow, leave a lot of room in front of you, in front of the vehicle, leave extra distance between the vehicles to make sure there's plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you, and stay very far away from our snowplows. Give them a lot of room to work. Don't try passing them very close. It can be really dangerous for you and the plow driver. Also, if you keep your vehicle outside, like most of us have to, make sure you clean your vehicle off before you have to drive to avoid flying snow causing accidents to other people. Also, if you have to travel, we really recommend checking out 511. Both Minnesota and Wisconsin have excellent 511 websites. Minnesota is 511mn.org, and you can find that link in the handout. The Minnesota site is great. It's got plow cameras, it's got road cameras, and of course, winter road conditions for most of the major roads in our area. Wisconsin 511 also has that great feature where you can see the current winter road conditions, whether they're good, slippery conditions, whether it's snow covered, or if it's icy. And if you see that term travel not advised, it really means travel is not advised. Our partners at MnDOT and WisDOT don't use those terms lightly, and so that if they say we really don't recommend travel on this road, it's really important to heed that warning and only travel if you really have to go out and it's an emergency. Otherwise, you should stay off of those roads when it is most dangerous during a storm. After a storm, take it easy. Take frequent breaks and stay hydrated. It's really important to stay both warm and stay dry. If you step in a puddle, go inside or go into a vehicle, dry off, change your clothes so that you don't get hypothermia or frostbite. Hypothermia is a real danger here in the Northland. I know we like to think that it's cold, and so we're used to the cold and we deal with it. But there are certain vulnerable populations that are especially susceptible to hypothermia. Those who are older adults that might have inadequate food, clothing, or heating in their homes. Babies that are sleeping in cold bedrooms. Anybody that's outside for a long period of time, whether that's the homeless, hikers out for a long time, hunters, camping, people that are outside for a really long period of time that are in really cold conditions can experience hypothermia. This can also impact people who are drinking alcohol or using illicit drugs. So if you are doing these activities or you know someone who's doing them, watch for these warning signs of hypothermia. You might not notice them in yourself, but you might notice them in others. And it's really important to get help if you see these signs: confusion, shivering, difficulty speaking, sleepiness, and stiff muscles. If you have any of these signs, it's a good idea to get medical attention immediately. Not to harp on this too much, but hypothermia really does kill people in Minnesota and Wisconsin. On the right is a chart showing the annual number of hypothermia deaths in Minnesota and Wisconsin combined, courtesy of the CDC. In 2019, we had 88 deaths in Minnesota and Wisconsin from hypothermia, and the latest year available when this presentation was made in 2020, there were 64 deaths. So this is something that affects people. This especially impacts older adults. This is a graph showing on the bottom, this kind of pink line. The salmon colored line is kind of all storm-related fatalities. The storm-related death rate from flood, thunderstorms, lightning, and then in the blue and the red are cold and heat, respectively, death rates for different age groups. So as you go older, as we get older, as adults become older, there are more likely to experience cold and heat-related deaths. This is why it's really important to check on your neighbors, check on your family. If you have an older grandparent or parent that might be turning their thermostat down really low, or maybe they have an issue and they're afraid to ask for help, it's really important that they have adequate food, clothing, and shelter so that they aren't susceptible to hypothermia. Another danger in the winter is frostbite. Now, frostbite is not as serious. It rarely leads to death, but it can lead to permanent damage of your body if you experience frostbite for too long. Frostbite is the skin literally starting to freeze. It leads to a loss of feeling, and the color of the skin changes. Skin can become white or grayish yellowish in color. The skin can feel unusually firm or waxy, and then of course there's a numbness. If you're out during a wind chill advisory, that means that frostbite is possible in 30 minutes or less. And if there is a wind chill warning in effect in Minnesota or Wisconsin, that means that you could get frostbite on exposed skin in 10 minutes or less. That is why it's so important if you're going out in these really cold conditions, if you're going out hunting, you're going out hiking, you're going out for any activity, make sure your entire body is covered from head to your toes, and that your skin is covered and that you stay dry. If you get wet, you can be more susceptible to hypothermia. So just to review our safety tips here, first of all, remember to wear appropriate clothing. Layers are best, cover your head and your hands, and stay dry. Number 2, be ready for living 3 days off the grid anytime. Number 3, if you notice signs of frostbite or hypothermia, take action immediately. And again, you might not notice them in yourself, but you might notice it in other people. And so if you notice these symptoms in other people, whether it's frostbite or the signs of hypothermia, make sure to get medical attention. Stay tuned to the latest forecast. It will change, and we'll talk about the winter forecast later in this presentation. And when a winter storm is approaching, or when a winter storm is happening, stay put. But if you have to travel, remember, ice and snow, take it slow. Ice and snow, take it slow. All right, let's talk a little bit about some winter weather science, kind of the cool stuff here. So if you remember back to like a basic meteorology class that you might have had in an earth sciences class in middle school or high school, when we think about the atmosphere, we like to talk about the different air masses. And across North America, we have a number of different air masses that are from cold to warm and from dry to moist. During the winter, we're usually sitting under the continental polar air mass. This is a cold, dry air mass that sits across southern Canada and most of the upper Midwest and northern plains throughout most of the winter. It's cold, but it's usually pretty dry. There's usually not a lot of moisture with it. For us to get snowfall, we need some source of moisture. Typically, that comes from one of two places. It can come from the maritime polar air mass across the Pacific Ocean, or from the maritime tropical air mass across the Gulf of Mexico. Sometimes we can actually even have an influence from the maritime tropical air mass of kind of the tropical Pacific Ocean, which is really interesting. So usually we need a weather system to bring in air from one of these moisture sources into the Northland to bring really heavy accumulating snow. We can get these weak clipper type storms, we'll talk about this in a second, that have a little bit of light snow, but they don't have a lot of moisture with it. But typically, if we're going to get accumulating snow, the moisture is coming from one of these two places, or sometimes both. When we talk about winter storms, you might hear some of these terms, like clipper. So a clipper is kind of a very common type of storm. It's a Alberta clipper, or there's other names for them that I've heard meteorologists use. This is when a weather system comes out of the northwest. Typically, it has a little bit of Pacific Ocean air in it, and it comes down across the upper Midwest and brings with it light snowfall amounts, usually ending with some lake effect snow on the south shore, and typically colder air. The other kind of storm track is a panhandle hook or a Colorado low. And we sometimes use these terms interchangeably. They're a little different, but essentially this is a less common track, but this is when we can really have the potential for high snowfall amounts. We get warm southerly flow from the Gulf of Mexico with a storm that kind of starts in the Panhandle region and lifts north to the Great Lakes. And because of this, we can see both higher snowfall amounts, and we can also see mixed precipitation types. What that means is rain and snow, or rain, sleet, snow, and freezing rain. So again, a clipper, it's usually there's a frigid Canadian air mass that follows this clipper storm. It's usually a narrow band of light snowfall. So that's kind of what's highlighted here in the yellow. And typically they go from Alberta, southeast across North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the rest of the lower Great Lakes. But they can vary. Sometimes they cut kind of straight across northern Ontario, and they don't even go into Minnesota. Sometimes they kind of right across the border. Sometimes it's more of a north to south storm track. So they can take different storm tracks, but these clippers are usually light snowfall amounts. Usually it's pretty quick. It snowed in the morning and it's gone by the afternoon. Not usually too dangerous, but they can produce some higher snowfall amounts in small areas. The other type of storm is a Colorado low. We also call this a panhandle hook when it starts really further south, but it's a low pressure system that usually develops somewhere across the high plains of eastern Colorado. May also start kind of develop in the panhandle region of Texas and Oklahoma, or even further south. These storms tend to have a lot of moisture with them. They might bring in Gulf moisture from the south or Pacific Ocean moisture from the west, And as they usually move slow, and they're usually pretty deep storms. Those stronger storms tend to cause stronger winds and also stronger precipitation rates. So we can see heavier snow amounts from them. They don't always just go from west to east. Sometimes they might start in northeast Colorado and just take a beeline right for Lake Superior and Duluth. Sometimes they go a little bit further to the east across Wisconsin and then lift north across the Upper Peninsula. Sometimes they can go even further east. Depending on that track, drives kind of how much snow we're going to see, what the winds will be, and how long this storm is going to last. The 2019 Thanksgiving blizzard that we showed some pictures earlier in this presentation is a classic example of a Colorado low. This was a low pressure system that developed in eastern Colorado and kind of tracked east across Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, and then across the lower Great Lakes into Chicago and across lower Michigan. With this storm track, we were in easterly flow on Lake Superior for a long period of time. This, combined with the fact that this was a pretty deep low pressure system, allowed this storm to produce a lot of snowfall, and we also had a lot of lake-enhanced snowfall because it was early in the season when we saw a lot of lake effect. An extreme example of more of a panhandle hook-type storm is a storm that originates almost in the Gulf of Mexico, like the 1991 Halloween blizzard. This was an extreme snowfall event across Minnesota and parts of Wisconsin. Duluth saw 36.9 inches of snow over 3 days with this storm. This is both a very deep storm, and because it almost originated in the Gulf of Mexico, it brought that rich Gulf of Mexico air, that tropical air, up with it. And while there was Arctic air to the north and allowed that precipitation to fall mainly as snowfall, it produced a lot of snow because it had that rich Gulf of Mexico moisture with it. So thinking a little bit bigger picture, when we're talking about a long-range forecast, we like to think of El Nino and La Nina. So why? What are we talking about? Why do you hear this term? Especially in the fall, you hear, the TV meteorologists will say they're producing a winter outlook and it's going to be an El Nino this year, or La Nina. So El Nino and La Nina are an ocean atmosphere phenomena driven by the water temperatures along the equator in the Pacific Ocean. When those waters are cooler than normal, like in the picture up here, that is what we call La Nina. When the temperatures are warmer, we call that an El Nino. And if they're kind of in the middle, if they're about normal, we call that just neutral. There's no driver. The reason that we use these sometimes to predict what the winter might be is because this ocean atmosphere phenomena literally means that the ocean temperatures cause changes to the weather pattern across North America. So with a La Nina, we see slightly different storm tracks, a jet stream that's slightly differently oriented than an El Nino. This change in water temperatures, again, influences where the jet stream is, and then this can influence where temperature and precipitation changes might be. So whether we're going to be a warmer than normal winter or colder than normal. This upcoming winter is a La Nina winter, and this is actually our third La Nina in a row. Generally, what this means is increased just storminess. Let me put that in quotes. It usually means that the jet stream is going to be kind of going across the country from northwest to southeast, and we might be under it. We might be a little bit further. It might be north. It might be further south. This can mean more chances for storm and, yes, more chances for precipitation, but it varies. It's a very variable type of pattern. This can also mean increased frequency of cold air outbreaks. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be a cold winter, but typically it means that in like January and especially February, we will see cold air outbreaks of, wind chill warning criteria cold at some point in January or February, where we see this Arctic air come down and visit us. Overall, though, La Nina is variable. So on average, what we have here at the bottom of this table on the bottom right, all of our La Ninas tend to be below normal temperatures for the winter months, and usually leaning towards above normal precipitation and above normal snowfall. However, that's not always the case. In last year, it was actually a pretty classic La Nina at below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation, but the previous winter was also a La Nina, and we had the exact opposite. It was both warmer than normal in the winter months, and it was drier than normal. And so this doesn't always work out. La Nina is not a guarantee. You can see in the 2011-2012 season, it was 8 degrees above normal in the winter. So it's not always a guarantee of what the weather pattern will be, but we use this to kind of give a general outlook of what we expect this winter. For this upcoming winter, for 2022 and 2023, We do expect below average temperatures, and odds are leaning towards above normal precipitation, but it's not a guarantee. What this means is that when we put out these outlooks, these are probabilistic outlooks. We're giving you a probability of whether the temperature and precipitation will be above and below normal, but there's never a guarantee. The weather pattern itself, day to day, can be so variable that we're just not great at forecasting the long range precipitation and temperature like this, but generally, we think that this winter could be very similar to last winter, where we had below normal temperatures and near to maybe slightly above normal precipitation. But it could vary. One winter storm could make a big difference. So what is normal up here? So normal amounts of snow here in Duluth, we get about 90 inches of snow each winter. For International Falls, it's a little less, about 73 inches. And for Brainerd and parts of north central Minnesota, it's actually even less, about 48, 50 inches. As you go further east across northern Wisconsin and then into the upper peninsula of Michigan, those amounts go way higher. There's a lot of parts of the upper peninsula that see over 150 inches of snow each winter. But as you go further south, like Hayward gets about 60 inches of snow each winter. Winter is also cold. Most of the days in winter we spend below the freezing point, which is why we can have such amazing winter recreation opportunities here, because the snow sticks around all winter. We typically get a handful of days where we have our high temperatures below freezing or below zero. In Duluth, we get about 6 days each winter where our high temperature is 0 degrees or sub-zero. International Falls gets a little more. The icebox of the nation tends to have about 11 of these days each winter. Low temperatures getting down to 20 below or colder is again similar. We get about 6 of those nights in Duluth and about 18 of those nights where they see low temperatures 20 below or colder in International Falls. We talked a little bit about winter precipitation. So winter precipitation, winter precipitation is driven by the temperature at the surface, so where we live, and also the temperature of the air above our heads, so in the first few thousand feet of the atmosphere. When that temperature is above 32, all the way down, when it's above 32 above the ground, and it's above 32 for the few thousand feet above our head, it's just all rain. It might be a cold rain, it might be only 34 degrees, but it's just rain. It's liquid rain, and it doesn't really cause any hazards to us on the ground. However, if it's above freezing, above our heads, but right here on the ground, maybe it's 32 or 30 degrees, that is when we can get those really dangerous ice storms. When we have temperatures that are warmer than above 32 degrees above our heads, but we're below freezing on the ground, that can cause liquid rain to fall, and it freezes on contact on different surfaces, and that can cause ice to accumulate. We call this freezing rain, or if it's kind of a lighter precipitation rate, we call it freezing drizzle. Sleet is another dangerous winter precipitation type. This is caused when there's a little bit of warm air aloft, so snow is falling, it melts melts into rain as it falls into this warmer air, and then there's a large area, maybe a 1,000 or 2,000 feet above our heads where it's below freezing again. And that rain refreezes into these small, hard, translucent balls of ice that we call sleet. These literal pellets of ice fall onto the ground, and as they do, they can be really dangerous because it can cause really slippery road conditions. It's like ball bearings on the road. Snow, of course, pretty simple as well. Snow is when it's below freezing all the way above our heads and on the ground, and snow just falls as ice crystals or frozen precipitation. A lot of times in the winter, you're going to hear us use a term called wintry mix. This is just our catch-all term for any and all of these types of wintry precipitation. That means rain, freezing rain, sleet, and snow could all be possible. There are also some other lesser-known precipitation types like graupel. If you're interested in those, check out our Winter Spotter website, and we have some resources for more information on that. Not all snow is the same. So if you are out there shoveling, if you've ever shoveled, there's a difference between that wet concrete snow and that dry powdery snow. So we think of the snow density as the snow to liquid ratio. If we went out and melted down all of that snow, how much liquid would we have? When that ratio is about 10 to 1, that means that 10 inches of snow, if we melted it all down, would have about 1 inch of liquid water content in it. When it's 10 to 1 or below that number, that is what we call wet snow. When there's a lot of water in that snow, we call that really wet snow or that concretey snow. There's a lot of liquid. When that ratio is around 15 to 1, that's pretty close to normal for this area. Our most frequent observed snow to liquid ratio is about 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 here in Duluth, but it does kind of go in a long tail here. So there are many storms where we're kind of in that 12, 14, 16 to 1 ratio. When we get into higher amounts, so above 20 to 1 ratio, that is when the snow is really kind of powdery. You could almost just take a broom or a leaf blower and just blow the snow away. And this is a lot of what lake effect snow. Lake effect snow is typically this powdery, really light snow. It makes a lot of snow out of a little amount of moisture. Speaking of lake effect, how does lake effect work? So lake effect works when we have cold Arctic air moving across a relatively warm body of water. Now, Lake Superior cools, but it cools very slowly. And so like this time of year in mid to late November, the temperature of the lake is somewhere in the low to mid 40-degree Fahrenheit range. When we have Arctic air coming across, when the air is coming across and it's maybe 0 or maybe 10 degrees, just a few thousand feet above our head, that is when we can see lake effect snow develop. We usually need a difference of about 23 degrees Fahrenheit or greater to be able to see this lake effect process really get to work. The reason for this is because that temperature difference causes the moist air, the relatively moist air sitting on the lake, to rise into and kind of fill the dry air above it with moisture, with clouds. And as that continues to happen over time, that air moves over the water, it picks up more and more moisture. And if it's a long enough fetch, if it's a long enough area of water that it goes across, that can pick up enough clouds to produce snow when it goes over land. This can happen actually on any of our lakes, but it's most common on Lake Superior, and especially on the South Shore when we get after a winter storm. We have Arctic air coming out of the north. Like I said, though, this actually can happen on inland lakes. This is a satellite image. The kind of pink salmon color is the land, purple is the open water of lakes, and then yellow are low clouds. In this example, you can see on Upper and Lower Red Lake, we have clouds, lake effect clouds streaming off of it. We can see this especially kind of in the October and November timeframe when we get an Arctic air outbreak and our inland lakes are still open, not covered with ice yet. Once, of course, ice covers the lakes, then this is much less common and it doesn't happen. Another thing that influences our lake effect here in northeast Minnesota and northwest Wisconsin is the terrain. There's a steep rise in elevation on both the North Shore and the South Shore, and that helps to enhance the snowfall rates and the clouds that develop and the precipitation at these higher elevations. This is what we call orographic or terrain lift. As the air comes towards the land, whether it's a north wind that's coming towards the South Shore or an east wind or south-southeast wind that's coming towards the North Shore here, the clouds are literally lifted up as they approach the higher elevations, and this causes an intensity in precipitation, causes clouds to develop, and can lead to the heaviest snowfall amounts being at the higher elevations. All right, so let's talk about measuring all of this snowfall and reporting it to the National Weather Service. If you're doing snowfall measurements, we recommend a yardstick at a minimum here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. You're going to usually need one for one or two of the storms. A ruler usually will work for most storms, but sometimes you're going to need a yardstick. We really like using those aluminum yardsticks. Those can be picked up for a few dollars from your nearest hardware store because they don't put a big hole in the snow when you're going out and measuring the snowfall. You're going to need some place to measure snow. We like using a snowboard, which is just a basic 2x2 piece of plywood that's been painted white, or any other kind of flat surface that you can use. You also might want to use a flag or reflective marker to be able to find your snowboard. Finally, if you'd like to measure the water equivalent of the snowfall, we recommend using a standard 4-inch rain gauge, and that you can get from the CoCoRaHS website. And we'll talk about CoCoRaHS here in a minute. So where do you measure snow on your property? Now, this is an example. This is the Fairlawn Mansion in Superior, Wisconsin. If this was your home, which would be a pretty expansive home with a pretty nice parking lot, where do you think would be the best place to measure snow? So when we recommend a place to measure snow on property, we want to shoot for an open area away from obstructions. You don't want to measure next to a tree or a building. Ideally, you get twice as far away from the nearest obstruction height. So if your two-story home is about 25 feet, you want to try to be 50 feet away from that and all other obstructions. You might be laughing right now because it's kind of difficult to do that in northern Minnesota and northwest Wisconsin, unless you're in one of the more open kind of plain-like areas in this area. So most of us who live in the wooded areas, it's going to be really challenging. So do your best. If this was your property, though, the best place to go would probably be that B point. That's kind of south lawn area, and that would be a great place to measure snow. But it might not always work. Sometimes we get a storm and the winds are so strong that it's just blowing the snow around that it's hard to get a good measurement. That's why it's important to just do your best. At some points, it's just an art more than a science when it comes to measuring the snowfall. Take a few average measurements in different parts of your property and let us know the average of what you have. When you're measuring snow, ideally you measure it on a flat snowboard that's been placed on top of the snow field so that you're only measuring that new snow. If you don't have a snowboard, you can use other surfaces, but just take a few measurements and be aware of possible measurement errors. Especially early in the season, realize that you're going to be sticking your ruler down and you might actually go into the grass or the dirt, and that can affect your measurement. You want to clear your snowboard off at least once per day or at the end of the winter storm, and then put it on top of the snow so that you're ready for the next storm. You don't want to clear the snowboard more than once per 24 hours, and that's because if you do that, you're going to get a little bit higher snowfall amount. If you measure every hour and clear the board, you're going to say that you measured 8 inches, while someone else next to you may have only measured 6 or 5 inches, and that's because the snow does settle over time. If you can, during a storm, when the snow stops, ideally if you can get out there and measure when the snow has stopped, that is great. Because sometimes, especially in the spring period, when we have the stronger sunlight, we can see some melting and settling occur. So the measurement that you get in the morning the next day might be different than what you measure right when the snow stops. If you can't do this, though, it's not a big deal. Ideally, though, we want the maximum amount of snowfall that accumulated for the day, but we don't want you going and looking for just the highest snowfall amount. Don't go and look for the big drifts. We want to know, on average, how much snow fell in your location. So you might be asking, well, can I just measure out on my deck or my patio? And the answer is sometimes. If there was little wind and little drifting in the snow, and the snow kind of just fell straight, up and down, it might be okay to measure on a deck, but try to measure from at least a surface that's 2 feet by 2 feet in solid surface. So don't measure on a deck railing. On a deck, the snow's kind of falling in between the gaps, depending on what your deck is like, or on a patio table, might be okay. But if there was any amount of wind, you want to try to get to a more open area. You might ask, do I always measure snow in the exact same spot? And the answer is not necessarily. Here at our office at the National Weather Service office in Duluth, we have an area out front of our office that's a little bit more open, and there can be wind that blows the snow right off the snowboard. So when that happens, sometimes we go to our backyard and we measure the snow back there. We have a few snowboards around our property, and we try to do our best with it. When it's windy especially, it's going to be difficult. Do your best. Try to make an average judgment of what the average snowfall was for that storm or for that day. There's two things that we like. We like snowfall and the snow depth. Snowfall is how much snow fell in the last 24 hours or since the last time you measured. And we measure snowfall down to the 1/10 of an inch. If you only have 1/8 and 1/16 marks on your ruler, that's fine too. You can just let us know what you measured and we'll convert it. Snow depth is just how deep the snowpack is. And we just measure this to whole inches because after you've gotten a foot of snow on the ground, it's so variable, the snowpack. So we just use a whole inch. You kind of just make an estimate. You can include this information as well when you do a snowfall report, but we really like to know how much snow has fell since the last measurement or in the last 24 hours. Ice is another dangerous winter phenomena, and we do appreciate any measurements you can get to us. It's really difficult to measure well. We think of ice in two terms. We think of flat ice and radial ice. Flat ice measurement is looking at something like a deck railing. So ice is something you can measure on a deck. And this is really simple. You just go out and try to take a ruler and try to get exactly how much, how many tenths of an inch, or if you have 1/8 or 1/16 marks, that works too, how much ice you have there. Radial ice is measured around a branch or around some other type of pole or wire. and that's taking the radius of how much ice is on there. Flat ice is usually measured. This is a great thing for like deck furniture or a deck railing. You take a ruler, look at how much ice is there, and estimate it to about the 1/10 of an inch, or if you have 1/8 or 16th marks, that's fine too. If you can repeat it on a few surfaces, that's really good information. We'll take everything you've got. If you say, I got a 1/2 inch of ice on my deck railing, but the sidewalk is actually warm enough that it melted, so the sidewalks aren't icy here, but all the railings are really icy. Take a measurement, give us the information, and report it to the National Weather Service. Radial ice is measured when you have a branch. So this is like a cross cut of a middle of a branch that has ice on it. You want to try to measure the top and the bottom and take an average of how much ice is about on that branch. Sometimes it's evenly distributed, but more times than not, it's a little bit heavier on one side than another. If you just want to take a picture of it next to a ruler and email it to us or send it to us on Facebook, that's perfect. We love getting your photos, especially when it comes to this dangerous ice. How do you get your report to us? Well, you have a lot of options. If you want to sign up for CocoRa's, or if you're already a CocoRa's observer, we really like the reports to come in that way. If you aren't a member, I'll talk about that in a second. If you don't want to sign up for CocoRa's, though, we have a number of other ways to send us reports. We have a storm report form on our website that we really like when people use it because it gets right into the system that we use to issue your storm reports. You can also send us an email and send us a message on social media, like sending us a message on Facebook and Twitter. And you can also call our 1-800 number there. That's a number that we reserve for your storm reports. Don't forget to include your location when you send us a report. I can't tell you how many times we get a phone call of, I've got 4 inches of snow here. We say, okay, where's here? I don't know where that is. So don't forget to include your location. And again, your photos are welcome and encouraged. If you get photos of ice, photos of really impressive snowfall, send us a picture. Let us know what it looks like at your location. We love to see it. If you can join CocoRa's, that's a great idea. So what is this thing I keep saying? Coco what? So CocoRa's is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, and it's a nonprofit organization that's sponsored by NOAA. We encourage you to use standard equipment and report at a standard time, about 7 o'clock in the morning each day, and you use either the website or a free app to send in your snow and rain reports every morning. Your reports, when you put them into CocoRa's, they get used well beyond our office. You'll see them on TV. Our hydrologists that make our river forecasts use them all the time. They're used by many people. Volunteers of all ages are welcome, and we have a lot of training and help. If you want to sign up for this, but you say, I don't know how to measure snow in the wintertime correctly, we have training videos, we have a lot of help, and we have a meteorologist at our office who can help you. The information for that meteorologist is in the handout, and you can send them an email and ask, hey, I want to join. Can you give me some help? This is a map showing all of our active and inactive CocoRa's stations. All the blue ones are our active reporters. We love our CocoRa's volunteers. If you're sending in reports, whether it's you send it once a month or you send in daily reports, we really appreciate it. If you can measure every day and send in those 0 reports when it hasn't even snowed, those are so important because we use that to track drought. So if you can report often, that's great. Even if you only want to report once in a while, CocoRa's is a great thing to sign up for because your report will get out to many places. If you don't want to report on CocoRa's, that's fine too. Our online report form is great. Again, this link is in the handout. You go to this website, put in what you're reporting, how much snow you've got or ice. Give us some details. You can type in as much as you'd like here. Tell us where you're located, and if you're on a cell phone, you can just use your device's location. And then finally, at the end, you have an option to add your name or contact information. So you can give us your name and your phone number in case we have any questions to follow up with. When you hit submit, we get that report immediately, and it's very easy, just a few clicks for us to turn that into a storm report. When it comes to reporting in the winter, be safe. An estimate is going to be better than no report at all, but if conditions are so dangerous you don't want to go outside, that's fine. Give us a call, send us an email, just let us know what you know, and get the report to us when you can. We truly appreciate each and every report. All right, we're going to end this presentation now with keeping up with the forecast. So how do you get the forecast from us? How do you know when the big winter storm is coming? Well, before, during, and after the storm, you can visit our website at weather.gov/Duluth for the latest information. If you just click on the map or you're entering your zip code at the top left of the page, you'll get our latest hourly weather forecast and all the information you need to know. Also on our homepage, if there's a storm coming, we will publish what we call a briefing packet. There will be a weather briefing PDF at the top right of this page with images showing the snowfall range that we might receive, the timing information, and other details you might be interested in. We also post daily our weather story graphics, and these are at the bottom left of our webpage. This shows you in a graphic or two what to expect for the next day, next couple of days, and any hazardous weather conditions coming up. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We post a lot of this same information on both Facebook and Twitter. And we also recommend that you check out local media resources. Our local TV stations, newspaper, radio, social media, local media apps are a great place to go for information before, during, and after the storm. When it comes to winter weather, it's important to use reliable weather sources. So here at the National Weather Service and NOAA, we think we are a pretty reliable source. Local media outlets, your local television meteorologists, they are a reliable source. They know what's going on in this area. National media outlets can also have good, reliable information, and there's a number of reliable weather apps out there that you can get information from. There are also bad information sources of weather. So if you see somebody sharing a Facebook post and it's from the super weather forecast storm page on Facebook, or it's the extremologist on Twitter, and they're posting something like, "Oh, Duluth is going to get 80 inches of snow tomorrow. You're not going to see it coming." Or maybe they post a snowfall forecast for a storm that's 3 weeks out, and they say, "Oh, look, the European model has 30 inches of snow next week, and here it comes. It's a big storm." A lot of times we're looking at the same information, but here at the National Weather Service, we have access to over 100 models that we're using. Plus, we have our experience and expertise and training that really helps us to make these accurate weather forecasts. Those Facebook pages and Twitter accounts, and maybe a news station that's in Florida posting that Minnesota is going to see 80 inches of snow with this upcoming storm, those aren't reliable weather sources. Come to your trusted sources like your TV meteorologist. Here at the National Weather Service, we'll have the latest information. A lot of times those pages are posting an extreme outlier of the spectrum of weather models that we're looking at. They post that because it's cool and it gets a lot of attention, but usually in that situation, there can be a lot of possibilities for what might happen with the winter storm coming up, or it might not even happen at all. So follow reliable weather sources for the best information. Another resource that we have for you is our forecast point page. This is at weather.gov/forecast points, and it's linked in our handout. On this page, it's the same forecast that you find on our regular website at weather.gov/Duluth, but we've kind of color-coded it. We have hourly details that you can just scroll through, and it's all color-coded with how much snow to expect, rain, precipitation, rain and thunder, the wind direction and speed. If you need a forecast for 2 days from now and want to know what the winds are looking like because you've got a plan to go hunting or hiking or anything outdoors, this is a great website to use, weather.gov/forecast points, and it works anywhere in the country, not just for the Duluth office. One of the things that you might see us use on our Facebook and Twitter accounts and posted on our websites and weather briefings is something that that's new to the National Weather Service in the past couple of years called the Winter Storm Severity Index. This takes our forecast of snow and wind and temperature and combines that with kind of other factors like what is our climatology for snowfall? Do we usually see 50-mile-an-hour winds and 2-inch-an-hour snowfall rates in November? Probably not. And so this is a way to measure kind of how bad is the storm going to be and where is it going to be worse, or the worst. This is rated on kind of a scale from minor impacts up to moderate, major, and extreme. And this can be a good resource. There's a link to this in the handout if you want to check out what this looks like anytime, but we'll usually share it when we have a winter storm coming up. It's used to kind of depict, okay, where is it going to be a minor impact? So for instance, in this Thanksgiving blizzard forecast, if you're up here in Grand Marais or Ely or International Falls, Thanksgiving blizzard wasn't really a storm. It was just, there was some light snow and that was it. Not a big deal. But if you were in a place like Brainerd, Hinckley, or even in Duluth or areas along the shore that had this purple extreme impact color, it was an extreme storm. Things were shut down for days. And so that's what this tool is used for, the Winter Storm Severity Index. Another kind of advanced tool is our snowfall probabilities. weather.gov/DLH/winter will have these probabilities of how much snow to expect and how bad could it really get. What's the high end possibility? This webpage can answer that question for you. We have on there the low end amount of maybe kind of what's the minimum amount of snow to expect from the storm, but also the high end amount. What's the highest possible that we could get with this storm? Sometimes you might want to know this because you have travel plans and you're saying, well, they're calling for 4 inches of snow, but what are the odds that we actually get 8 inches with this storm? On this webpage, we also have the probability for greater than 6 inches or 8 inches or a foot of snow. So again, weather.gov/DLH/winter. This gets updated about twice a day, usually around 4 p.m. and 4 a.m. with the latest information. And this uses both our official forecast and many models, over 60 weather models that go into this. When we have a storm coming up, we will issue watches, warnings, and advisories. So first, a watch just means that warning conditions are possible soon. A winter storm watch means that in the next 2 to 3 days, we could see a winter storm warning issued. A winter storm warning for Duluth and the most parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin means that we expect around 6 inches of snow within 12 hours, or 8 inches of snow within 24 hours, or some combination of wind-driven snow, sleet, and freezing rain. A blizzard warning is for blizzard conditions with strong winds and low visibility. An ice storm warning is for ice accumulations of a 1/4 inch or more. And a wind chill warning is for those wind chills when we get down to 40 below or colder. Advisories are a little bit less impact. An advisory means use caution, be aware. You will need some extra time to reach your destination if you have to travel, but it's usually not impossible travel conditions. For us in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we usually issue these for about 3 to 5 inches of snow in 12 hours, or 5 to 7 inches in 24 hours, or maybe some combination of some wind-driven snow and sleet and freezing rain and that sort of thing. These are pretty common. We also issue wind chill advisories, and that's for wind chills 25 to 40 below. Typically, that happens, handful of times each winter. Not incredibly dangerous, but if you're going to be out for a long period of time, the wind chill advisory is your cue to be cautious and be prepared. We issue more of these advisories and warnings for areas around Lake Superior because of that lake influence. For Duluth, we issue about 10 to 12 winter weather advisories each year and about 3 to 5 winter storm warnings. But again, we get more of these on the North Shore and on the South Shore because of that lake influence. The wind chill hazards, again, that wind chill advisory is for 25 to 40 below wind chills. That means frostbite is possible in anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. A wind chill warning is for wind chills of 40 below or colder, and that means that you could see frostbite in 10 minutes or less on exposed skin. Another new type of warning that we are issuing is called the snow squall warning. The snow squall warning is a warning that we issue for a short period of time where there will be a rapid reduction in visibility due to snowfall and the roads are near to below freezing. Why do we issue these? Well, that combination of really heavy snow and cold or rapidly falling temperatures can cause roads to quickly become snow-packed and icy. And the sudden onset of these conditions can cause dangerous multi-vehicle crashes. Now, these are only issued in otherwise benign weather conditions. Think about it on a sunny day in March or April where it looks pretty nice out, and then all of a sudden it's almost blizzard-like conditions outside. That is when we have a snow squall. They're issued for a small geographic area and a short amount of time. It's almost like a tornado warning, but for the quick onset of dangerous blizzard-like conditions. This is what that warning will look like, and on the right are some webcam loops of what it looked like in April of 2020 when we issued one of these warnings. It is like a severe thunderstorm or tornado warning. It's a short fuse warning, meaning it's only in effect for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and it means that dangerous winter conditions are approaching. If you see a snow squall issued, you might get the alert on your phone. If we send it to your phone, you should slow down if you're driving, pull off the highway if you can, and if you're about to go out, maybe take a 20-30 minute delay, just wait it out, wait for that snow squall to pass so that conditions improve. If you have to be out, again, check 511. In addition to the National Weather Service and other local media outlets, during the storm, we recommend that if you must travel, check 511 for the latest road conditions. We also appreciate any reports of mixed precipitation using the MPing app. The MPing app is an app from NOAA to report whether it is raining, snowing, or something else is falling from the sky. It's completely anonymous, and you can report on this as often as you'd like. Now, you can't say that you have 6 inches of snow. You need to send us that through a storm report on our website, or send that to as a message on Facebook or Twitter. But if it's just precipitation falling and you want to let us know that the rain has begun, or it just switched over to snow, or maybe it's raining and nothing's happening at all, none is actually an option in the app. And we really appreciate those reports when the radar looks like it should be raining, but you check you look outside and it's not actually raining. So you can send us a none report on MPing. Again, it's only for currently falling precipitation, not for measurements, but it's a great resource, and we really appreciate these MPing reports. During the storm, if you're a CoCoRaHS observer and something significant is going on, you just got a lot of rain or a lot of heavy snow in just a few hours, you can send us what's called a significant weather report. This is a special report form that you have access to as a CoCoRaHS observer on the CoCoRaHS website, and it's perfect for sending an evening update or an overnight update that, hey, I got 6 inches of snow in the last 6 hours. It is really coming down here. We really appreciate those updated significant weather reports. After the storm, let us know what it's like out there. Report snow and ice measurements and any winter storm damage to us here at the National Weather Service. If you're not a CoCoRaHS observer, use our online report form. Photos, again, are really encouraged if you send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, or send us an email. And the more details you put in your report, the more trust we have in your report. If you're a CoCoRaHS observer, use the CoCoRaHS website or app to enter your measurement in around 7 a.m. each morning, or whenever time you have it set up, as long as you're kind of consistent with that. And you can also send in your significant report as well during the storm. After the storm happens, you can find the snowfall reports right on our website. The link to this is in our handout, but we have both a map of kind of all of your individual snowfall reports, and we also have a kind of graphical map showing where we think the snow fell based on your reports. Geographically, so every pixel across the area, how much snow fell. All right, so you have reached the end. Let's just do a quick final review here. Number 1, be prepared. Make sure your home and vehicle are ready for winter. Number 2, be informed. Know where to find the latest reliable forecast information, like weather.gov/Duluth, our social media accounts, and other local media resources. Know that the forecast is going to change over time. And if you see a friend or family sharing a bad forecast, tell them to come to us. Share the National Weather Service page with them and say, hey, don't listen to that unreliable forecast or that old forecast from 2 days ago. Check out what the National Weather Service has right now. And 3, we appreciate your reports. Sign up to be a CoCoRaHS observer if you're interested in reporting winter precipitation to us. If you're not interested, that's okay, but you can still send us your reports. You can use the online report form, social media, email, or just give us a phone call. We're here 24 hours a day. You can also use the MPing app to report whether it's raining, snowing, or something else is falling from the sky anytime. That's all we had for today. Thank you so much for watching. Again, that handout is on our website at weather.gov/Duluth/winterspotter, and you'll also find it in the description of this video as well. If you have any questions, never hesitate. You can send us an email or give us a phone call, and we're happy to talk to you. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Stay safe this winter.